would be good.
There you go. Recording in progress.
Well done, Steve.
What more can you ask? Yes. Laser pointer. Right. Okay. This time, a little talk on the lost tunnel, the one that didn't survive. There may be others, but this is one particular one that I know all about. In fact, Williamson's tunnels were incredibly well built, and so many of them have survived 200 years with buildings on top of them and all sorts. They were well constructed. We have come across the odd tunnel that didn't survive due to being deliberately demolished, but this particular one had a rather sad end. I'm going to start here. This is how can I clear this lot? This is photograph you've probably all seen before, the open mouth of the so-called Great Tunnel, the one we've never been able to find. We know it's about 150 feet long, used by the Territorial Army as a drill shed. It may still be there, it may not, but they built this enormous brick curtain wall across the front of the row of tunnels here. And there to the side of it is the triple-decker tunnel. We know that still exists. Sorry, we've been in it. But the land in front of the mouth of the Great Tunnel, down here and stretching off to the right on this photograph, is where we lost a tunnel, unfortunately. Now, this is a modern-ish picture, well, 2000, 2002. It was back in 1954 that the council decided they were going to put up a set of 3-4-storey flats on this piece of land off Elm Grove, Smithdown Lane here, Elm Grove behind, and this set of 4 blocks of flats were to be built on this piece of land. Now, this piece of land lies directly behind this high wall, and at that end of it was where the Great Tunnel was, and in this photograph, the magnet joinery factory is above, and our Williamson's house site is here behind the trees. Now, in 1954, the work started to put in the foundations for the first block of these flats that were going to be built by the council themselves. It all came to a very sudden stop after just a couple of months, when they found that there was all sorts of things going on below the ground, which made life very difficult for them. For some reason, the Director of Housing and City Architect, Mr. Bradbury, should really have done his homework and should have known that this was a seriously dodgy piece of ground with various Williamson tunnels underneath it. But he doesn't appear to have known anything about it at all. It's as if it was totally unknown to him that the Williamson tunnels were in this area, and there could be things going on below the ground that would make it difficult to build his flats. Now, we've got just 3 photographs sent to us some years ago by a man called Dave Bird, I think it was, whose father in the 1950s ran a company who were pulled in by the council to investigate this land. This is the piece of land not directly behind the flats, but alongside. The railway cutting runs through there on the far left-hand corner. And they did all sorts of site investigations on this land in 1954. And for some reason, the man who was involved and his company, long since gone, but his son had these 3 photographs, and he knew about the Williamson tunnels, and he sent them to us. We were very grateful for them. They appeared in our newsletter, The Mole, a number of years ago. And this photograph shows the fact that they have uncovered the top of the triple-decker tunnel here. They smashed a hole through the roof of it, and they've gone inside. I've got another photograph, which isn't here, where they've gone inside, realized what they found, and then they've dug down where the end of it is. So they discovered one big tunnel, and poor old Mr. Bradbury was going to put up a set of flats over here. He changed his mind very quickly. At the same time, they discovered other places, and they went into this rather enormous chamber. I didn't know where this was for many years, but this, I think, is about probably a good 36 feet wide brick arch tunnel. And we actually found it many years later. Now, in about 2000, 2001, 2002, these council flats were taken over by an Iraqi gentleman called Mr. Kasim. He wasn't a good landlord. The flats were probably run down at the time, and they got run down even more by the time he'd finished with them. He took them on anyway, and the piece of land behind the flats, directly behind the big wall and the magnet factory, belonged to him along with the flats. But I think this piece of land here, the green part leading up to the railway cutting wall, was not his at that time. If you can see here, there's a concrete wall that is built along the outside edge of the triple-decker tunnel to protect it after it was discovered in the 50s. That's where they were going to build a set of flats, but decided not to because the ground was too dodgy. Steep slope down there, and this wall holds back the slope. Going through to 2002, the whole of this piece of land had become really overgrown and a real mess. You wouldn't believe the stuff that Mr. Kasim was leaving lying around in here. It was an absolute tip. But I've done a talk before on the search for the Great Tunnel, where we were allowed to dig in through the big brick retaining wall here to try and get into the Great Tunnel underneath Magnets. We were given permission by the owners of Magnets and Mr. Kasim and the council to have a dig. We didn't manage to find it on that occasion, unfortunately, but while we were there, we did manage to get into the top level of the triple-decker tunnel, which lies along here. This was all working inside the trees, all overgrown area. The very next year, Mr. Kasim had acquired this piece of land as well as the piece behind the flats, and he's got plans to completely alter it. The diggers have been in, they've scoured the land clean completely, they took down the fence, they moved a lot of earth around, and they leveled it off because Mr. Kasim had plans to put a series of very large shipping containers along here. He scoured the bank back a long, long way. We used to run down there. Not really his land, but he's taken liberties and he scoured it back. And the next step was going to be to put down a concrete slab that he was going to put his shipping containers on. And that's how it looked in November 2004. And at that time, we were busy searching for tunnels that we thought existed but didn't know for sure. And we got permission from Mr. Kasim in November of 2004 to go on the land behind his flats and do a borehole survey. We picked 4 spots where we wanted to dig boreholes that we thought we might come across something useful. So this is the spot where the first borehole was dug. That's it there. Excuse me. Not very far from the high retaining wall. I think about 5 meters in front of it that way. And this borehole was very interesting. It went down 18.5 meters in the ground. 18.5 meters without hitting anything until it finally hit the bedrock. That's about 60 feet. So that point is directly behind this red vehicle here. Now, the bedrock should be very close, just under the surface in the whole of this area. But going down 18.5 meters means there's something very important going on here. I believe it was a very, very deep quarry. Might have been started by other people before Williamson, but it was probably carried on by Joseph Williamson. And he quarried in from Smithdown Lane, and the stone was hauled out that way up to Smithdown Lane. So after that, 2 more boreholes were dug back here and here. And those 2 just went down 3.5 or 4 meters before they hit the bedrock. Not particularly interesting, but just what we would have expected. But then the 4th one was set up behind this white vehicle here, just a few yards away from the back of that block of flats. And that one went down about 3.5 meters. Then it went through a layer of brick, then into a void, and then it carried on down through loose fill material until they terminated the borehole at 12 meters below ground. That was the clue we needed. That told us there was very likely a tunnel under there, exactly where we hoped that there would be one. from the investigations that Mr. Bradbury had done back in 1954. So we immediately asked Mr. Kasim if there was any possibility we could get a digger on there and have a look. Now, this is a plan drawn by our people who were on that dig at that time. This line here is the high brick retaining wall with the magnet joinery factory behind it. The first borehole is that one there, which went down 60 feet, 18.5 meters. Number 2 and number 3, oh, actually they're labeled differently. Number 3 and number 4 only went down 3-4 meters, hit bedrock. This one was the important one, just 3 meters away from the block of flats, and this one went down through a tunnel roof, as we believed. So that's about 17 meters from the wall. And Mr. Kasim was very good to us. He allowed us to bring on a digger of our own, and we had a dig at that point, and we went down to find what we could find down there. I've only just found out just a few days ago from Chris Sharples, who is still digging with us now, this one here with Les Coe, that in fact, I had thought that Mr. Kasim was very reluctant to let us on, but he seems to think that Mr. Kasim was quite glad for us to come and do some investigations, because he really wanted to know what lay below his ground himself, and he didn't have much idea. So there we are. The digger has started digging a hole at the point where the borehole went down, and we've gone down 3.5 meters. There's Mr. Kasim standing there watching what's going on. I thought he was probably quite unhappy, but maybe he wasn't. At the same time, I think he was having a water main laid on from the block of flats. There's a trench running along there up to the wall. So he's having a water main laid on, which is going to feed water to his containers. And I believe, I've only just found again from Chris Sharples just a few days ago, that there was a suspected gas leak on the land at the same time. So here we have Transco looking for a gas leak at the same time that we were on the site. So it was a bit of a mess. But anyway, it seems he didn't mind us being there, and it was useful for us. So by absolute sheer fluke, we dug our hole where the borehole said we should be digging, and we found it straight off. That hole there is a hole in the brick arch roof of the chamber we were looking for. And in fact, we didn't have to make a hole. That hole was already there, and it was covered by an old sheet of corrugated iron. As Chris told me, corrugated iron painted with bitumen on the top. And that had obviously been put in the hole after the people in 1954 had smashed their way through to find out what was there, and then covered it over with this piece of corrugated iron before filling the hole in. And we managed to get straight back to exactly the same spot. Absolutely wonderful. And sheer fluke. There's Chris at the bottom of the ladder in the hole, standing on top of the tunnel roof. I'm not quite sure really whether he's looking really excited or terrified, or whether he's just about to go in. I don't think he was the first to go down though. Anyway, that looks quite a long way there. Les Coe is actually standing in the hole. He's still around, but not very active anymore. Chris is still with us. And this is Bill Douglas, another one of our trustees, who's taking notes and writing down the measurements, I would think. So there it is. Les is standing in the hole through the roof, quite near the top of the roof of this wide chamber that runs that way. And there's the borehole just a foot away from him. Now, as it turns out, there was a great big pile of spoil below this hole, all the stuff that had fallen through or been pushed through to fill it up. Usual thing with Williamson tunnels. So there was no need for another ladder down through this hole, because he was standing on the top of a spoil heap at about waist height, and he would have been able to just heave himself out after going in there. There's the hole looking from the surface. And then we'll take a look inside. This is what that chamber looked like. Now that is a solid sandstone bedrock back wall. To get your orientation, that direction towards that back wall is towards the block of flats. The other direction is towards the big high retaining wall with the Magnus joinery factory above it. And this is the hole where they came in. Our people didn't make it. It was already there. smashed through in 1954, in the same way that they did through the roof of the triple-decker tunnel on the same occasion. And there you can see the spoil heap directly below the hole, so there was no need for any more ladders. That's looking in the other direction, away from the solid bedrock back wall and looking towards the high brick retaining wall. And that's as far as you can go. The full length of the chamber that was available to our people to investigate on that occasion, 2004, was about 10 meters. It obviously goes further, but whether all this spoil here has been bulldozed in or pushed in through the roof, there's no way we can know. But unfortunately, there is a great big dollop of damage to this tunnel roof. This brickwork is part of the roof, and it's fallen and slumped on top of the spoil heap. You can see more brickwork here that's delaminated from the roof, and it's completely blocked the way, so they couldn't go any further. Now, I'd love to know how and why this happened, but there's no way we'll ever find out, I don't think. But knowing how well most of Williamson's tunnels seem to have been built, I'm rather reluctant to think that this has just collapsed of its own accord. You can see how many courses of brick there are. He didn't skimp on these things. So I think it's rather more likely that some kind of trauma from above has caused this collapse. I don't think it looks quite as if it's deliberate either, but there's no way of knowing. But it completely blocks the way. Now we're looking down to one side, and there's the hole we came in through. Looking to the other side, lots of lovely stalactites here. Don't know how long they've been growing for. It's very, very delicate little things. One touch with a finger and they would snap off. Here's Jeff Jones, one of our ex-diggers and an ex-trustee for some years, no longer with us, unfortunately. And you can see behind him that great heap and the collapsed piece of the arch there that prevents us going from any further. There he is looking down towards the side. Not sure which side. Easy to lose your orientation in here. And there, again, that mass of the roof that has come down. But the funny thing is that when you see other bits of the roof of this chamber, like that side wall there, the brickwork is in perfect condition. And here on the other side, it was definitely well built, and this lot has survived quite nicely. So it makes me think that it was some external trauma that must have caused the damage. There's a lot of broken sandstone in here as well. Perhaps it was just a waste material from the railway cutting, as we found with the Merseyflex chamber as well. And now we have to leave it. We obviously didn't have very long to do this. We were investigating. We were lucky to get Mr. Cassim to allow us, but we couldn't stay, and the hole had to be filled in. We had to walk away. But at least we had the opportunity to go in, to find it, to mark the position of it, to take photographs and take measurements. And we were stuck in an area about 10 meters long, and I think it was about 36 feet wide. And in usual FOWT mode, before leaving it, we threw an old fridge in there. This is not as silly as it sounds. A fridge is a useful thing to cover the hole and prevent any more loose material falling into the tunnel. But if we ever get the chance to go back and investigate again and find the spot, you'll know it's the right spot when you see a fridge buried 3.5 meters down in the ground. So this is another one of the diagrams we drew. The high retaining wall back there, the edge of the block of flats is down here, and our entry hole is there. And from the entry hole, it was just 3 meters this way to the solid bedrock back wall, and then only 10 meters to the point where the roof collapse has occurred, and we couldn't go any further. But obviously we assume that this chamber goes further in that direction and probably joins into the great tunnel, which is above there. So we're going to move forward now right up to, well, the 28th of February, 2017. This is the railway cutting, Edge Hill to Lime Street. And on the night of the 28th of February, 2017, a great chunk of the railway cutting wall collapsed, caused absolute chaos. Lime Street Station was closed down for over a week because of this. It cost millions of pounds. Trains were stuck in the station, others couldn't get in, and Network Rail were all over this like a rash in the middle of the night, working through the night. And when we turned in to our site at Mason Street on the following morning, Wednesday, the 1st of March, our site had been commandeered by Network Rail and their contractors, who were ripping out our fences and fences from the magnet site next door, and tearing everything apart and removing these shipping containers that Mr. Kasim had put on there. That's what it looked like down in the railway cutting. There was no way any trains were going to be running there for a while. And of course, nobody knew at that time whether any more of it was likely to collapse down onto the track. This is a photo taken from the other side of the railway on the very first day, first morning, the Wednesday when we turned in, and before they'd had a chance to move the containers. Mr. Kasim had put 4 enormous 40-foot shipping containers on here, 2 side by side there, 2 side by side here, very close to the railway cutting wall. I'm pretty sure he shouldn't have done it. He didn't have planning permission. There were stacks of old washing machines piled up very close as well. When the Rail Accident Investigation Branch looked into this and wrote their report, Mr. Kasim came in for a lot of criticism, but he didn't take all the blame. It was partly down to Network Rail themselves for negligence, and partly down to the council and a complete lack of cooperation and coordination between the 3 of them. Mr. Kasim did a bit of a disappearing act. We didn't see very much of him after that. It seems that at one time he even had his containers double stacked on here, but he was forced to take the top layer down by the council. I don't know that he was really supposed to be doing what he was doing at all. I think he was refurbishing washing machines in these containers. That seems to have been a side business as well as owning the flats. So Network Rail within days had scoured everything off this ground. This is the back of our site here. They took up our fence. They scoured all the undergrowth off the bank, the trees and everything. And they pulled all the earth back away from the cutting wall there and put this, whatever it is, curtain over it. And of course, Mr. Kasim's 4 shipping containers that stood on here were gone within a day. So they pulled out all the stops. They were working night and day. And by the time they finished and made the area safe alongside the cutting, it was at least a week before the railway opened again. So it rained like that for a couple of years, and we've moved forward now to January 2019. By this time, there'd been a compulsory purchase order for the flats. They lay empty. Morgan Sindall, the developers, were about to pull them down, and the intention was to build a 13-storey car park on this site. But they were a bit nervous about what lay below the ground, of course. They had a bit more knowledge than the people in 1954 did, but they were still nervous. There were unknown things happening below there. So in January 2019, they came into the site and started doing some borehole testing. That's one of their borehole rigs, drilling rigs. Network Rail had fenced off this area, so nobody could go anywhere near this at all. They still had to come back and rebuild the cutting wall, but they hadn't arrived yet. So Network Rail, Morgan Sindall started doing borehole drillings on this land to try and see what lay below. And during the time that Network Rail's people were making the cutting safe, they had some really big machines trundling across this land many, many times. And now again, Morgan Sindall's were on the same piece of land here with some very big machines, 30-tonners and bigger. And on the 19th of March, 2019, while Morgan Sindall's were still on the site, they tell me that one day, well, this particular day, there was an almighty whoosh of escaping air, and this great crater appeared. as the ground sunk. And that was the end of our tunnel that we'd rediscovered in 2004. It had just decided it had had enough, and it totally collapsed. Morgan Sindall said that there was nothing, no big machines on top of it at that time. They were on the site further over, but nothing was on there. And it just chose that moment to give up the ghost. Obviously, it was compromised with the damage that we'd already seen to its roof. And it had had big machines trundling over it and more borehole surveys done. So it just decided it had had enough at that point, and it just collapsed altogether. So we've lost it. Within a short space of time, after they'd made the ground safe, the Network Rail people were very unhappy about this, because they were just about ready to move onto the site themselves and start repairing the cutting wall. They built a fantastic scaffolding structure over here, cantilevered, hanging right over the railway cutting. And they used that to repair the cutting wall, as you can see the new stonework there, while the trains were still running underneath, because it took many weeks to set it all up, many weeks to take it away again, quite apart from the rebuilding. So anyway, they had to make the ground safe, and they had some enormous machines coming up and down here. But it was too late. Morgan Sindall were now demolishing the flats, and that was the end of our tunnel. And that's what it looks like now. By the end of 2021, I think, early 2022, the council had built this, Morgan Sindalls had built this 13-storey car park for the council. And that's what stands there now. And our lost tunnel is under this piece of land here. But of course, there's nothing left to be seen of it, so we won't be going back into that one, unfortunately. We had a length of it about like that, but we're quite sure that it continues that way, and under the high wall, probably connected into the triple-decker tunnel, but we'll not be able to prove that now. The only good news is that the triple-decker tunnel, did I say triple-decker? I meant the Great Tunnel. The triple-decker tunnel is still lying under here, hopefully still intact. The Network Rail people built a new concrete wall above its outer edge with this fence on top, and the triple-decker lies under there, our section of it, about 30 meters long, with all the rest of it on the other side of the railway. So hopefully that's still preserved, and that's one of the ones we want to get back to as soon as we can. And of course, we want to find that grey tunnel, but we're not having much luck there. So that's about all I've got to say about that one, I'm afraid. That's the tunnel that got away. We lost it, and that's the end of it. It's a shame to lose any tunnels, but there it is. Can't be helped.